Most stories about serial killers have an ending. The killer is caught, the bodies are found, and the rest of us are left to speculate about the murder's motivations. However, that's not the case for a few killers who walk away from the crime scene without any handcuffs. In this video, we'll be looking at 4 serial killers who are possibly still out there. One was even caught for the murder of dozens of women, but eventually walked free. Eastbound Strangler. Atlantic City had once been America's summer playground, but eventually it went downhill. Legalized gambling put some gloss on the old boardwalk, but the rot was never far away. On November 20th, 2006, 2 women who were out for a walk made a grisly discovery. The bodies of 4 women had been neatly discarded behind the Golden Key Motel in a suburb outside of Atlantic City. The women were fully clothed except for their shoes and socks, and were positioned face down in a line behind the motel. Barbara Bredor, Molly Jean Diltz, Kim Raffo, and Tracy Ann Roberts had all been strangled, earning their unidentified killer the nickname of the Eastbound Strangler. Whatever happened had happened quickly. Unsurprisingly, all the women were prostitutes, hence easy victims for the killer. According to the Toronto Sun, Bredor had been missing for about a month before the bodies were discovered, while Raffo had been seen the day before she was found. Law enforcement said at the time there were definitely no shortage of suspects. There were suspects early in the investigation, but those persons of interest would eventually fade to nothingness. One was a 41-year-old handyman named Terry Olison, who stayed for free at the Golden Key Motel in exchange for repairs when the homicides took place. An angry girlfriend told cops that he was the killer. Inside his room, detectives found cameras set up and images of his girlfriend's teenage daughter undressing. But the DNA didn't match, and Olison was never named as a suspect. One by one, all of the suspects were cleared of the murders, until ultimately there were no more. An appeal for the information on the 4 murders was reissued in the last days of 2021, with Chief of County Investigations Bruce Shields saying, "15 years later, we have not made an arrest for these homicides, but we're always looking. We're always working and re-examining information about this case. We haven't stopped. We won't stop." A $25,000 reward has been issued for information leading to the killer's arrest, which can be shared with any local law enforcement bodies. Hercules. Back in 2019, Bangladesh police were on the hunt for a suspect serial killer who identified himself as Hercules and was on a killing spree of, wait for it, violent abusers and molesters. Yes, you heard that right. 3 men killed in sub-districts of Bangladesh were identified as Sajal Ripan and Rakib Mullah. Each one was, at least, shot in the head, and each was dumped with a note tied around their neck. The exact messages varied, but the gist was the same. They had been accused of violent assault and molestation of women, and they were killed for it. The Statesman called Hercules a serial killer, while Al Jazeera called him a vigilante. The difference? That's kinda difficult to define. Law enforcement said they were investigating, but at the time they had no idea if it was one killer or a group of vigilantes acting under a single name. Families of the victims had another theory, stating that witnesses claimed they had been picked up by plainclothed police almost immediately before turning up dead. Police had ruled out that theory and suggested someone was acting in response to an already high number of assault cases that were only increasing. The cases have attracted quite a bit of attention on social media. Most users are hailing the killer's actions, calling them heroic. One user praised the killer as a hero. It's been 3 years and there haven't been any arrests. The killer is probably still out there hunting for new suspects, and quite frankly, there are a lot. Pedro Lopez. Dubbed the Monster of the Andes, Lopez is believed to have killed hundreds of people between 1969 and 1980. Most of them being young girls. While many of those living outside of South America may not have heard of Pedro Lopez, he was named the most prolific serial killer by the Guinness Book of World Records in 2006. This record was later removed from the book because of complaints saying it made a competition out of killing. Well, if killing were a competition, Pedro Lopez would probably be the winner. Not only because he's believed to have killed over 450 people, but because he was allowed to walk free after doing so. In fact, there's a chance that you could walk by Pedro Lopez on the street today. That's right, he's still at large. No one knows the vicious killer's whereabouts or even if he's still alive. Pedro Lopez's life took a twisted turn in 1957 when his mother caught him fondling his sister. He he was kicked out of his home at the age of 9. By 18 years old, Pedro Lopez started making a living by stealing cars and selling them to local chop shops. Eventually, he was caught by the police and sent to prison. While in prison, Lopez was sexually assaulted by 3 other inmates. In an act of retaliation, Lopez fashioned himself a weapon and killed all 3, one of them with his bare hands. These killings earned him the respect of his fellow inmates, none of which ever tried to harm him again. Once Pedro Lopez was released from prison, he moved to Peru, and his reign of terror ensued. He began kidnapping, sexually assaulting, and murdering girls with horrendous frequency. At the height of his crime spree, he was apparently murdering around 3 girls per week. Most of his victims were girls between the ages of 9 and 12. The officers eventually took Lopez into custody and interrogated him. At this point, the true extent of Lopez's crimes was revealed. Lopez led the authorities to 53 shallow graves that he dug around Ambato, and several more that he'd used to bury his victims in other parts of the country. It's believed that he killed at least 110 people, and some estimates are a whole lot higher. Pedro Lopez was sentenced to 16 years in prison, the maximum penalty for murder in Ecuador. He was released 2 years early, in 1994, for being a model prisoner and exhibiting good behavior. In 2002, the Colombian government launched an Interpol order of arrest against Lopez for a fresh murder. Rumors say that he's currently living in Tolima department of Colombia as a homeless man. Others say that the relatives of his victims put a bounty on his head and he was murdered. No one really knows. You may have even walked past the world's most prolific serial killer on the street and had no idea. Manchester Canal Pusher. Let's start from the beginning. Rumors of the Canal Pusher were born on January 11, 2015, when the Daily Star Sunday published a 2-page article headlined Manchester's Killer Canals. The article cited that since 2006, 61 deaths had occurred in the Canalway, which stretches for over 10 miles through central Manchester. Since then, that number is estimated to have grown drastically to 85. The paper labeled the mysterious pusher as a serial slayer, while pointing out that it's extremely unlikely such an alarming number of bodies is a result of accidents or suicide. A number of the alleged victims have since been identified. In 2011, the body of trainee sports teacher Nathan Tomlinson was discovered in the River Irwell, 2 months after he went missing following a Christmas night out. A year after that incident, 21-year-old student David Plunkett was found dead in Manchester Ship Canal in 2012 after attending a music event in Trafford Park. A coroner ruled his death as an accident, though his parents protested otherwise, saying they had heard screaming and howling in their last phone call with him. They had no evidence of foul play, and similarly, a pathologist said there was absolutely no evidence that David had been assaulted, and that the most likely cause of death was drowning. To this day, the police have continued to insist that the Canal Pusher doesn't exist, and to support the myth theory further, former Detective Chief Superintendent Tony Blockley said in a Channel 4 documentary, if a serial killer decided to cause their deaths by pushing them into the water, how could that person guarantee they would die? It's probably worth mentioning that a large proportion of Manchester Canal deaths are blamed on drugs and alcohol. Hundreds of people make their way home along the narrow pathways of the canals after a heavy night out every year, making the likelihood of people tripping up and falling in all too high. Still, in 2022, the case was still very much on the minds of residents, and the Manchester Pusher case was examined in a new documentary addressing the claims of a serial killer. Do you think any of these killers are still out hunting for their next victims? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and also subscribe to our channel for your regular dose of whodunits. See you in the next one. Until then, stay safe, stay warm, and don't get any crazy ideas.